Hey, good evening, everybody. This is John Davey, and you're listening to Have a Good Time. I wanted to respond to a listener comment, or a viewer comment, I should say. Listener, I guess. My friend Dave Poer, old friend Dave Poer, left a comment. It's really good to hear from you, Dave. He was asking some questions on about the second podcast ever, which was had to do with reality goggles, or if you could have these like X-ray goggles and you wear them and you could see through walls, these sort of imposed walls that we put up, I would say individually and collectively kind of put up these walls. So my question sort of to you, the viewer or listener, was if you had this, amazing technology and you could put it on, would you do it? And of course, there are, I think, are reasons to go either direction, if that makes any sense. This sort of touches on actually the most recent video that I did, which was defining and then arranging your values sort of in order of prioritizing your values, defining them and then prioritizing your values. So I hope, Dave, it's okay that I just read this out loud, presumably because you left it on a public space. It's okay for me to read it back, but I just want to sort of get it up there in my head so I can respond to it. But it says, John, this was good. I've been feeling a little blindsided by reality lately and have made some changes to the way I've been living. It's strange looking back on myself retrospectively and being perplexed at my perception of my state and my blindness to reality in that time. Just to pause there, that's something that I can totally relate with, and is certainly an interesting phenomenon. It's kind of one of the miracles or curses or something of consciousness. If in our kind of conscious state, I think as a species, we're kind of just in the flow of our, animal instincts and just existing there. We're sort of just being. And once consciousness arose out of that process, this emergent property, we were able to kind of step away from being in that constant flow and observe it going by and even look into the future. And of course, look into the past so it wasn't just sense memory. It was something that we could conjure up in our mind. And strange phenomenon, to be sure. So I'll just get back to it. I think that perhaps we need the X-ray goggles to see through the walls of the narrative into the truth of reality. But what are the sources of those walls? We superimpose them over reality. Why? Fear? Convenience? Inability to handle or even comprehend truly existing without a self-created story? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the nature and material that these walls of narrative are made of, that we need goggles to see through. He said some other nice things, but that's sort of the meat of it. Great set of questions. My crack at it is going to be that, first of all, the questions that you asked about, like, why do we superimpose these filters over reality? You could say walls, filters. I guess filters is probably a better way to put it. Scott Adams, who I've talked about a good bit on this blog, just because I recently read his book, and his thoughts have been sort of bouncing around in my head a lot in the last couple of months. He talks about, maybe kind of like what you said, Dave, which is that we kind of have the inability to handle or even comprehend truly existing without some sort of narrative, right? And Scott Adams talks about how we have a whole bunch of different filters with which to see the world, and you can apply this filter and apply this other one, or maybe have 5 or 6 filters that you're seeing the world through, and then you can take one away, and it changes the aspect of seeing through all the other filters. So it's incredibly dynamic, and I think this is and complex. I think this is why humans have the ability to hold separate and conflicting, self-contradictory concepts within the mind at the same time. And it does, I think in the short term, you can do that. And over time, it sort of has what I would describe as some, negative effects on your state of mind. It's sort of to have to hold 2 contradictory concepts in the mind at the same time creates this kind of tension. It can be exhausting and wear down, parts of your mind that maybe you don't want to use them. And I was talking with my friend Don the other day about this, and he was saying that if you do this trick on yourself, I heard something about Prince having a really painful conversation on the phone with his dad at one point. And I don't know if I remember all the details, but he was in a phone booth somewhere. He had a really painful conversation with his father on the telephone. And then after he hung up the telephone, he says he vowed that he would never open himself up like that, be vulnerable like that again. I think that's kind of powerful. So if you do that, that sort of thing, it doesn't have to be with family necessarily. It can be about anything. It can be about how you identify yourself and present yourself to the world, your persona. It's assuming we all have to have some sort of persona or identity, to feel like we're not just this floating amorphous thing in the world. Once you play that trick, you can't revisit it without deconstructing that, your identity. And that's what my friend Don was talking about. He was saying, once you do it. So for, in some sense, and one of the answers to your questions, I think, would be part of the reason that we impose these walls or put on these filters is truly self-preservation, like you suggested in one of your questions, self-preservation. And if I look at my own life, and the times that I have, either self-imposed, I've self-imposed this series of walls and mazes. It's been for, yes, convenience, self-preservation. What was the other one? Fear. Yeah, fear. Fear of what? Fear of disintegration. Fear of disintegration. And I think it's important to have some. Well, it's a terrifying thing. If you are willing to step away from that for a second, or put the goggles on, so to speak, and look through that series of walls to see what's, the stuff that's on the other side of it, that can be terrifying because, it it's kind of representative of our general fear of the unknown, which is kind of death. It's kind of death. It's like encountering death. So either you have to have courage or accept like that you're afraid of it. I mean, to live consciously. I guess that's kind of like the what I'm shooting for here. The kind of world that I would like to live in is with more people who are like living consciously and stuff. And so you have that question of fear of walking into the unknown, and then so you feel like you're encountering death. But I think it's helpful. So you can either have courage, or if you have something else to sort of anchor yourself while you're stepping out of that. Like the guy, at the who's going out to do repairs on the space shuttle or whatever. He's going out into space. It's very risky, but he has a job to do. And so he sort of like has this lifeline that he allows him to sort of float out into space without going too far afield and being lost forever. But that's like what it feels like, I think. And it depends on what you want to do. I think that's why it's so important to define and then arrange your values and just really spend some time with that, because it's a worthwhile investment if you want to be a little closer to reality. I guess that's how I would sort of sum that up. So have courage, take heart, do the hard things. Will it elicit social lashback? Perhaps, and if you can sustain or withstand a couple of waves of that, then you have something to build on. It's like, well, those people didn't approve. Maybe we argued about it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they saw things so differently, or I saw things so differently than they did, that we decided it wasn't, worth it to try to like, smush it, smash it, cobble it together against it, against our wills. So it's like you can move on, or they can move on. But once you've sort of sustained a couple of waves of that, then you're like, okay, well, that happened. I'm not dead. Here I am, still living life, moving forward. And, once you like toughen up a little bit, then the possibilities grow. I don't know if exponentially is the right way to put it, but they definitely expand upon themselves. So thanks for the series of questions. I think it's great. I think if people keep leaving comments here, I'm going to start a new playlist on the podcast, which is responses to listener and viewer comments and stuff. So, and you can also email our email, like the email address for the podcast, which is haveagoodtimepodcast@gmail.com. So, thanks so much everybody for listening and watching. If you have questions or, just want my feedback, it's actually great to have this kind of conversation again across the span of space and time, and sort of reintroduce that into my life. It's really exciting. I do have friends around here that I've made since moving here that I can have these kind of conversations with, but it feels good to sort of be reintroducing old friends back into the conversation. So Dave, thanks for the question. I've been enjoying Dustin's podcast. Everybody should check that out at his username is DustinSeth1 on YouTube. So you can go find his microphone therapy podcast over there. It's really cool. And I hope you guys have a great evening. I know I am feeling energetic and happy about the podcast, the way that it's going. I might be getting some more video editing software here coming up pretty soon, but I'll keep you in the loop. Thanks everybody. I hope you have a good time.